What up, y'all? Welcome back to Blake's Take Two. We are back here with, we like to keep it kind of up to date with cultural shit. I don't consider myself a movie critic or nothing. I know you don't either. But we're going to do somewhat of a movie review slash discussion here on one that I think touches on a lot of different shit, which is why this is a nice one to bring up here. One of my favorite movies I've seen in recent memory, Judas and the Black Messiah, which came out just about a week ago here from when we're recording this. So we've had a little bit of time. I watched it day or so after it came out, so I've had a little bit of time to digest. I was like somewhat aware of, like, I knew Fred Hampton, I knew the name. I definitely didn't know the extent that he was targeted in an organized fashion by the Chicago police and shit. I had heard, I knew he was killed by the police, but I think obviously we'll get into the plot. But seeing everything play out made me get a whole different level of anger and just realization of what really fucking happened, which I think is why this is a really important movie too. But so the plot centers around William ONeill, who was a FBI informant in the late 60s, early 70s era. So it was right kind of after the prime meat of the civil rights movement. A lot of prominent figures that were pushing for progress had been killed. JFK in the early 60s. Martin was in there as well. Malcolm, I'm pretty sure, was in there as well.
Yeah.
And so all of these people within, which is we were just kind of talking about before, this crazy, like, to picture this many prominent people being off. It really shows the powers that be.
And
What was happening.
they mentioned a couple of the guys, the two guys who created the Black Panther Party, Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton in Oakland. They mentioned them. They were dealing with a lot of turmoil with, the FBI and, police as a whole, and also Eldridge Cleaver. I'm pretty sure that's his name. Eldridge Cleaver. They mentioned him in the movie as well. He was like cast off to I can't remember the African country, but to Africa, and they mentioned him a little bit in the movie of, like, he was pretty much ran out of the country, but
Yeah, and it just shows the extent that the powers that be were willing to go to prevent this movement, which, in this, looking back at what's happening now, seems crazy to think that 50 years ago there was some bubblings of similar, not the same, not the ability to organize in the same numbers, but the same sentiments. And it showed, they were clearly doing something, because within the system it started to recognize what was going on and saw them as a legitimate threat, which is kind of where this movie picks up, as William ONeill is portrayed as, he's a 17-year-old at the time, I believe it was, when the FBI approaches him. He was in Chicago stealing cars, making money, hustling, illegally here and there, doing that type of shit. So not like, morally, this is where the movie, I think, causes some caught some criticism, in terms of, it definitely is from a perspective that is from, to an extent, the rat perspective. William ONeill is an FBI informant who ends up assisting the FBI in killing Fred Hampton. That's not what they initially approach it as. He gets kind of ringed into this in a way that, I think this movie is important, because the evil in this movie is coming from the FBI end. I think that's the important thing to keep in mind. I think a lot of anger came from, they're humanizing William ONeill, and I think that does happen because of the way it's told.
That's a
but the
weird
point
thing
is,
to be angry about. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. We'll get into that separately. It's kind of its own, because it was something I did see from multiple sources that I respect to an extent, or just it was something that was relatively consistent. But it is from his perspective, in terms of, it shows the FBI approaches him when he's 17, and at first it's to get information on the Black Panther Party. They use him to infiltrate and get information, and spoiler, obviously, if you're watching this, there's going to be some, we won't get into every plot detail of it, but it gets to the point where they're able to twist his arm enough, and where they have enough on him, to the point where he ended up actually slipping something into Fred Hampton's drink the night of the infamous FBI raid that ended up killing him, another member of the Black Panther Party who was guarding the door, multiple people injured in the his pregnant widow shot. Like the way they
And that is
portray it,
100%. That is 100% historically
yeah,
accurate. They
down to the
100%
number
ran
of
up. They 100% ran up in his house with his pregnant wife there, and the other members of the Black Panther Party 100% ran up there and shot them all dead. Well,
and
not all
that
of
I
them.
think
Some of them survived, but that is 100% accurate.
that I didn't know the extent of how that went the fuck
Yes.
down, and
Yes.
not only that, like the fact that the movie and the director that they had a one shot, we are gonna show this how the fuck it happened,
Yes.
way of showing it was that was probably the hardest scene, because like that was the toughest thing about the movie, and I loved it. Was knowing even in the spots where you're like celebrating and where there's some spot, because Daniel Kaluuya fucking destroys it in
Incredible.
like
Incredible
him
performance.
getting an Oscar for playing Fred Hampton. I know you don't like the awards. It's going to be important. The fact that that's going to get a stage and a platform to have a speech,
And I
as
just
it
want
should.
Well, we'll probably get into the acting a little later, but
Yeah.
he's also a British man. You know that accent is just 100% on point. To have that is just crazy.
Yeah,
But
he's
go ahead.
phenomenal. But to show it all the way through like that, and to be true to that, like knowing that it's going there and during the movie is so. It reminded me of Fruitvale Station. It was the only other time I remember in a movie getting that daunting, like, God fucking damn it, like we know how this ends.
Yeah.
And the way they execute, like I watched it with my dad. I assigned him this. I didn't know I was gonna watch it with him, but I told him right when I saw this was coming out, I was like, I don't know what you know. I don't even know the full story, but this is required viewing for any middle-aged white person that doesn't have a full, complete grasp, even, and if I don't, that's most of y'all, or if not all, of what not only the police relations current day, because all of this ties together, but
Absolutely.
even with how that played out and how it was portrayed, because my dad grew up in Rogers Park, Chicago, which is like more in the city than I've grown up, and he, even as this was playing out, and even like while that scene was happening, but other times too, was like, this isn't how they told this. Like when it was unfolding at the time in Chicago, they're showing the Black Panthers in the movie. I think this is important in terms of, obviously, this is probably going to be the most popular place that the Black Panthers are portrayed in a mainstream light.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it shows the feeding of the community and the educating and people that have, like, I know this because I've looked into it and we understand the internet, and we've had discussions on this before too about how that plays a part in our generational education. And there's a generation that knows spoon-fed from the news, and he kind of had that moment of like, they were telling a complete different story and getting away with it, because then there was, even if 1,000 boomers wanted to communicate the information, you can call people, there's very few, it just didn't necessarily exist like that. So to see that, I think, is important and really well done in the movie too. Like, it definitely throughout the movie feels like, and as it should, the police are a like other side of a war figure. And I think that ties into something we'll talk about too as well, that whether people agree with it or not is something that I think we need to understand and like connect the dots to, because that completely has to do with what's going on now. But before we get into all of that, let's start with, so I mentioned it before, the center of it being Will ONeill ended up being a little spot. Before we get into all the good stuff, I just want to, like, we won't make this the center of anything, but I think it warrants like talking about, because I understand completely, like, this is the first time Fred Hampton is getting anywhere close to this level of a story told, and a lot of people want it to be his story.
Yeah.
And I get that that should there be a biopic? Fuck yeah.
Absolutely.
This proves absolutely that's a story that should be told. But, and I've seen some of the directors speaking on this, that is not what this story is. This is an espionage, like, see what the fuck the FBI is willing to get gross and do to take down a group that is just looking to uplift the Black community in an effective, organized way. That's literally all it is.
Not only the Black community, because they showed what Fred Hampton was doing. He was trying to unite, working class white people. He was trying to unite
And even
Puerto
that,
Ricans.
I did not know that happened like that. Like the Rainbow Coalition, I think it was called. My dad remembered that. And even seeing that, like the scene where he walks in to the Confederate flag waving, I was like, I couldn't even 2021 me do that. And to see like that's what really makes you understand what those white people back then must have been shaking in their fucking boots at. Like that dude could have moved people today in crazy numbers. And there's reasons that government entities come for these people.
They reference it in the movie, right? It's in the title, obviously, the Black Messiah, but that was 100% accurate.
And I think that was part of it too, is like I didn't even contextualize it all the way. And then when that is what the movie about.
They were so fearful of some sort of Black leader coming to the heights and organizing and galvanizing the general public at large. And
Bill ONeill, if it wouldn't have been him, it would have been somebody. I think is the moral of that story is that the moving machine that you saw in the opening scene, where the director of Chicago's FBI is putting Fred Hampton, at the time 21-year-old kid, on the big screen and saying, "Get this motherfucker in jail. I don't care if he commits dropping slurs like it's for nothing," and that's that's the machine that was moving here. So if Bill ONeill would have looked at that dude and said, "Fuck you, I'm not a rat," he would have been rotting in jail, and they would have gone to the next underprivileged 17-year-old and said, "Hey, you wanna get away with your shit?" And so it's definitely a story of that. I think it's definitely an interesting aspect, because even for me, like, you want so badly, I think, to even knowing like those same times where you're like, damn, this is gonna end with Fred Hampton getting killed. You want to hate him more than you're like capable, because it's such an oppressive force. Like it is such a heavy thing that you can't help. Like while I completely understand that, I don't, at the end of the day, like I wouldn't have done it. I die before I do something like that. But I can sympathize with, you're 17.
Exactly.
You have Jack, like there has to be some level of sympathy to it. He ended up killing himself the day the documentary came out. Obviously,
do you know how he killed himself?
Did he walk into traffic?
Yes.
Like it was straight, just
that is
guilt. So I think there has to be some level of that. But again, the movie it's definitely more about Fred Hampton. I don't think it does any disservice at any point to any of that. I just think that's the perspective that it's told from, and it makes it definitely interesting. Like I think a lot of the discussion on the arm twisting they're willing to do is important, because they're literally using the already set economic fucked upness of the community to just somebody's going to,
exactly,
when you dangle a piece of meat around it's going to happen when people are starving. So
and that's the thing, like it's easy to point the finger like, oh, I would never do that in hindsight, but like,
right,
there are a lot
everybody's got there
are a lot of people, there are more Bill ONeills in the world than there are Fred Hamptons. Like, come on, let's keep it a buck.
I think they did a good job of portraying both ends of it.
Yeah.
And even the little nightmare scene, like they showed how that shit was, obviously with how it ended, but they showed how that was haunting him, and he was a torn ass individual, if nothing else.
Sure. Yeah.
And so you had a point you brought up here with modern Bill ONeills.
Yeah, I was watching an interview. They had both LaKeith Stanfield and Daniel Kaluuya on separately, and LaKeith Stanfield was speaking on modern day Bill ONeills, and I was like, damn, this was in the late 60s. The FBI was doing this type of shit. Imagine what they're doing in 2021 to collude against not only Black people, but just, poor people, like, you know, protesting against the establishment. What are the lengths that they're going to today in 2021 as opposed to 1968, right? Like
Yeah.
the technology, right? The, the fake accounts on Twitter and IG, and people, being imprinted into protests. We seen that during the summer, like, off-duty cops and that sort of thing being at the protest to like spark up controversy. I think possibly infiltrating music. Uh, I feel like 6ix9ine is probably involved with the FBI in some sort of way. That
Even hide it.
like the spark up some sort of controversy. Like what lengths are the FBI going to today?
Yeah, and I think
That's
that
that's what I'm.
I think this movie hopefully makes some people understand the modern, because I even had some of these conversations like I'm a white person involved in this, so I have like statistically less chance of having something done to me because I was attending a protest, or but at the same time, something I did know, what just being involved in general was like, especially after Ferguson, like knowing that those people, not only a lot of people that were prominently involved as protesters were killed, but that they were tracked by the FBI, that they were monitored and followed and all this types of shit. And
Yeah,
I think
that too. Yep.
seeing it completely play, because I think the idea that oh, the FBI would take all of these resources, like at the end of the day, unless you're an incredible hacker or something, you just don't have the resources that they have. That's what they exist to do, is have those crazy level of resources that they can find and get whatever information they need. So the idea that they would take that and use it against a dissenting citizen in a manner that ended that even was straight up kill them
Mm,
is preposterous to some people, when that's the plot of this movie that's based on that actually happening.
mm.
So it 100% is connected, because not to make accusations about any, but it's not ridiculous to say that in an organized fashion, that there are absolutely ways the FBI and shit use resources
Absolutely.
go against these modern movements. And
Like
when
this
you
is
see,
not some weird conspiracy theory. We literally have seen it happen,
yeah,
50 some years ago.
that is actually what happened. And
Yeah.
so I think that brings up, something I was going to bring up at another point, but I think it kind of fits in now, is that it is part of it's an extension of the same beast. And I think this movie does a really good job of bringing it back to that. I think post Biden getting in, and oh, Trump's gone, don't worry, this can never happen again, that you have the little bit of liberal end of it that's like, all right, everything's fine, we no, we're very far from where we need to be. And I think we're getting to that point of, oh, hey, maybe we can retrain the police, maybe we can move away from this abolish and all the extreme. And I think it ties all the way back to, and I've used this metaphor before, and I think it just perfectly applies to this, is at some point you can fuck with the top of a plant all you want, but at some point it's the roots. And the roots of this are the roots of modern policing are what you see in this movie. They just are. It's the same badge. It's the same police force. If I go get pulled over in Chicago, it's the literal same employers that did this. So this idea that there's only one answer. Like there has to be a different governing body to it, because they can not only can they not police themselves very clearly, but they will literally act as the opposing force in against progress if it is not on their agenda. And this is what happened. And to say that it could never happen again, or wouldn't, or hasn't, is, if it happened then with, like you said, like if they could do that in the fucking late 60s, they got
Right.
Twitter, they got the internet, everybody has a phone that you can track. Like, if they want to get motherfuckers, they couldn't get them. It's just a matter of making it look certain ways. That's all it was then. It was the Panther shot first. And
Yeah.
that's all you needed then.
Right.
Now we know it was 199 and the shot came after he got hit.
Right.
So, but it's controlling the narrative is a really important part of it. And I think this draws the narrative very, very well squarely back onto like abolishing that root of that. The fact that at some point in your governing body of the police, that was not only allowed, but that was the norm. Like they show the scene where dude who played Landry, you watch Friday Night Lights, right? The show?
No, just the movie.
So you know the police dude in this who plays psychopaths and all this shit? He plays consistent psychopaths. The main police dude. He plays an amazing psychopath. He started off with Friday Night Lights and played the nicest, straight-laced guy. That's the first time I ever saw him. Now he plays nothing but psychopaths.
Yeah.
But like the scene where he is with the head of the FBI and he's asking about his daughter. Like about, what if she brings home a colored even that, like his daughter is like 1 or just absurd. And even then it's shown like if you even budge on something like that, you're not with this force. Like it's so anti what progress is that I just don't see any alignment with, all right, well, we can make this change to it so that it doesn't fit into the thing that moving forward. It just doesn't. And I don't even know if that was what the movie was trying to, I don't think that's obviously what the framing of it was, but I think it did a really good job of like, very hard to walk away from that and go, wow, like those motherfuckers are gross. They're just gross. And they're not, the guys there now are these guys' kids. It's not like they fired all these dudes and went, wow, that was wrong. We're changing. It's the same motherfuckers. So I think it did a good job of keeping them in the correct, warranting the proper amount of sympathy that they warrant, which is not a lot in a lot of scenarios. And that bothers some people. But when you're the oppressing force, that's what it is. And I like a comparison that I don't, you haven't made this comparison. I don't know if you agree with it or not, but I've made this only because like being Jewish and understanding in the narrative of how Holocaust stuff happens, you don't get to come in at the end and go, all right, we're going to say like, you got to go somewhere way before and say, hey, this is a step in that process. If you can't see how a police officer to a lot of people is the same thing as seeing a Nazi after seeing the execution that takes place of Fred Hampton, like they are to some extent, they are an extension of that Nazi party. They just are. And to defend and say they should be, it's still them. Like I told my dad, I was like, okay, so like, if a lot of people like to do the, I know a good cop, and it's like, okay, but can you know a good Nazi? And it's no, because the thing that they're signing up for, the thing that the uniform says, is standing for and supporting something that supersedes everything else. They might be they might be a good husband, but it doesn't matter because they're part of oppression. It's the same thing. And it just needs to be more commonly accepted. When they did something that you see on this movie wearing that uniform, and it's the same uniform, at some point, we need somebody with a new uniform. That's kind of it's not the exact same thing, but it's not as wild of a way to look at it as that is what they act as in some capacities. That was not, I've seen it, if you've seen any of the Holocaust movies that exist, there's always a notorious scene where the go through the houses happens, and you could put it side by side with that Fred Hampton scene, and it's very hard to tell me who is the Nazis and who are the police in America. So
in that situation, it's hard to argue with you.
So it's more in that context, but I just think it needs to be for the end of modern politics that does see the police as an aggressive opposition force, and that is full abolition, and that is, not even to say you don't need to root for the death of cops. Everybody has their different thoughts on every end of the spectrum of this, but you can't look at it like a complete, you're you're a bad person, this and that, for saying when the other side has done that to somebody, having certain beliefs about it. That I think needs to be a little normalized.
Yeah.
All right, that exists. This is not that long ago.
No.
70s is our parents were alive for all of this. So this all exists in the modern world, and it's in the ways it's played out. So the next thing you wanted to get to here too is which deserves. We've brought up Daniel Kaluuya. LaKeith Stanfield did an amazing job as well, because he had to portray a really difficult role. He said, I don't know if you've seen some of the interviews he was talking about, he almost didn't take it because he was like, fuck that guy. Like, why the fuck would I want to play that guy? But I think he probably got into a similar, like, it's understandable, obviously, we discussed. And the way they both portray both characters, I think, is it carries the movie. There's a lot of amazing performances in this. The woman who played Fred Hampton's widow fucking killed it too. A lot of standout performances. Daniel Kaluuya was cool for me because so you mentioned he is British, which I didn't even know, because British people are so talented. I still don't understand. If someone could explain to me why, when you have a British accent, you sing, it sounds American. I don't understand how the fuck that. I don't.
Because if like Adele, I mean, I think you're talking about Adele, right?
Oh, this is how it happened.
She just grew up listening to like soul and R&B.
Can you sing with a British accent? Is it possible?
If I like grew up like listening to a British singer and idolizing a British singer, maybe. Yeah,
but I didn't know that. But so the first time I saw him, I don't know if you know of anything he's had on like some British shit that shows him in that, but I saw him on Black Mirror, which I don't know if you've seen that one. Have you seen it's the one with the bikes, where it's the credits and you audition to get?
That was him. Yeah.
So I remember the speech he gave. He gives like a fucking, still to this day, one of my favorite monologues I've ever. I'm a monologue sucker, and he gives like a fuck the world, anarchist, like everything you stand for is bullshit. Incredible monologue. And it's one of the earlier Black Mirrors. I'm pretty sure it's before Netflix picked it up. One of like when it was still good. And that monologue, literally when it happened, my ex at the time, I paused it and went, that motherfucker's a star. That monologue right there. So it's crazy to see. Like, I didn't predict this motherfucker, but to see the monologues he pulls up, like, because that's where I think it stands out, is those one shot, just him and the kid, like, and then just crowd him shots that it goes to.
Then you see a lot of that in this movie. Like a lot of that is like him on stage, like doing the speeches, and
that's why like it was cool to see it play out like that. Like, oh, so he had it like that. And I mean, I want to see him get an Oscar for that, because it would just be fitting, I think, timely. I know you're not the awards person. I'm not like full on, oh my God, it means everything. But it would be cool to see it have a platform at a place that hates to reward Black people and then give it to somebody for playing Fred Hampton. That would make some old white racists roll in their graves, if nothing else. So that's
what else he was in Get Out, like great role there.
I think that was probably where
he Black Panther
mainstream star was after Get Out.
Get Out, Black Panther. I'm trying to think of something else. I can't think of anything else. LaKeith Stanfield, obviously, we all seen him in Atlanta. His fucking range is
because I never would have predicted,
crazy to me,
even man. I think where I first saw it was that episode of Atlanta where it was like the horror episode, and he actually, like, going into that, you guys didn't tell me shit, and I was anxious the whole last time, mostly because he was just so good at portraying that shit. And so I think now to see him and I still haven't seen what's the one that came out where he's a star of it a couple years ago.
Sorry to Bother You.
Yeah, I still haven't seen that. I heard that was
Sorry to Bother You was dope. It got a weird ass ending, but it's cool. It's a cool watch. Knives Out. I don't know if you've seen that one, but he had a small role in that one. A couple other ones. Like he's a really good actor to me. Like I said, like his range is like really, really dope. Like I like people who can like play a character like Darius on Atlanta. Super funny, goofy, but still kind of like conspiracy theorist type of guy. And then like
there's some cognition there. Like he's not a dumbass.
No.
Out there.
And I just like people who can play like multiple roles like that. That's like super dope to me. Like that's what I mean. Like that's a good actor. Like I feel like
Both
some
of
actors
them,
is like they
both of
just
them, I
play
think when you look
themselves.
back,
You know what I mean?
like
But
it's cool to see. I was just talking about this too, is like with my family, is that we're starting to see the real established, like young crop of actors who are going to be, who we're going to see
yeah,
every fucking movie.
yeah,
And
yeah,
guess what? 80% of them are black, and it's fucking raw.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Like
I know
the
you have.
most talented artists in the world are artists in every aspect, but now we're starting to see in acting, we're gonna have so many more prominent black directors too,
Yeah,
like
yeah. Ryan Coogler, I
prominent
love
black
Ryan Coogler.
directors. So we're gonna, it's crazy to see it speeding up, but like to see in a movie like this, like you're getting to see two of them at the same time, kind of like rise to this. All right, like they're real. Like, I mean, it's throwing Denzel out there is obvious. Like Michael B. Jordan is probably the only one right now that you could, but there's a lot of crazy potential and a lot of
Then
young
you
great
know,
actors.
I don't know if you don't watch Snowfall, do you? You never seen that?
I've seen enough previews now where it's on my
You
list.
gotta
I
watch Snowfall.
actually
Damson Idris. I'm pretty sure that's his name. He's also British, black British
star
dude.
that.
Yeah.
I'm sure too, like a lot of the supporting actors that right now we can't even name you off the top.
Right,
At
right.
some point, get some roles from this too that end up making them. So all around, I think for that end, it'll be a really cool like platform to just elevate a bunch of people's careers in a movie where most of the cast is black, and it's just
Right, right.
nice to see. That shit doesn't happen all the time.
Mhm.
I think Black Panther is probably notorious because it's kind of the only one, but that even wasn't a superhero, so it's hard to,
Yeah, yeah. Different type of
to live.
fit. One thing, uh, I love this movie. I think it's great. I think it's one of the best movies I've seen in a while. But I think I'm tired of the black traumatic trope of like super politicized, super serious, super like woke movies all the time. Like I haven't seen this like a comedy, like a black comedy in fucking years, man. Like, and that's what I grew up on. Like the late 90s and like the early 2000s were very notorious for like, all the Fridays and like all the like, silly, goofy, how high, like just silly, goofy black comedies that I grew up on.
A
You
lot
don't
of
see
people in
none of
the
that shit
industry
no
like
more.
dipped out. A lot of the like comedy industry
And
in that end, I feel like they
I
either
don't know if
dip
this is
out or they fall
Hollywood.
off.
Like, I don't know if it's Hollywood, like for like a 5-year stretch, it was like nothing but like if it was a black movie, it was a slave movie. 12 years of slave, and I don't want to watch that shit. Fuck out of here,
I
man.
still haven't. Yeah, I'm not.
Like I don't want
I'm
to I
an
don't want to
empath. I
watch that,
can't do
bro.
all that.
Like I don't want to watch fucking black people in bondage. Like I want to see black people having a good time every once in a
Yeah.
while. And even this movie did have like some balance, right? So like when they're in the car, like those car scenes where like they're kind of clowning around and goofy, like that was cool. Just see like the balance, but
But
like
it's
I
hard
want.
when the backdrop is, where
Yeah, exactly,
it's that
exactly. Like
story.
the overall arching, theme of the movie is very traumatic and it's very hard. And I don't want to watch that shit all the time. I want to see black people having a good time on fucking films every once in a while. So like that's one gripe I have, not with this film, but just like Hollywood as a whole.
Maybe it is the politics of that's the stories that people want to tell right now type of thing. But I would too. Like my biggest gaping hole in my creative taking in has been everything Dave Chappelle left. So
Hold on. We
no,
ain't gonna bypass you saying gaping hole and taking it in. We not about to just.
forgive me, Dave.
Oh
Well,
shit.
how else you want me to put it? He left the. No, I'm not gonna. Nothing's gonna. Nothing's gonna sound good after that. So there was a void left from the creative.
Oh god.
The creative skeet. What I just saw a commercial that reminded me of this. It was a local news that sometimes I just leave it on after games because it's just hilarious. They saved a fucking, what was it? A coffee shop or a donut shop called Splurge Dunker or Splooge Dunkers. Trey is called Splooge Dunkers. I was like, what are y'all dunking this shit in? Oh, Splooge Dunkers.
Oh my
That's
god.
even TV, I think is the same
Because
thing.
that
A lot of
doesn't
the
even.
shows are heavy and it's.
That's what I'm saying. Like every black show, every black movie is just like, oh my God, look at black people suffering and going through all this shit. It's like, bro, black people have a good time too. Like, please depict this on camera too.
Yeah.
Like, maybe I gotta write a script or something. I need to see black people having a good time. Or even just a corny like rom-com with just black people in it. That would just like warm my heart at this point. It's just like you don't even see that type of shit.
Like just remake Guess Who again or something. That always works.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
That's always a go-to. But you brought up, and this kind of goes with stuff you talked with before too, like fear for upcoming black leaders and how this, again, like we talked about the surveillance and those things, but I think hopefully now people understand, and this is something I understand when I see people take stands already, but now a bigger audience can hopefully understand like the risk and the justifiable fear that people have for not for speaking up, even for literally having an opinion, because that is the root of what anybody had an issue with in this from the FBI standpoint and shit.
Right. Because, you know, in the 60s alone, like I think we started off saying JFK died, MLK was assassinated, Malcolm X was assassinated. And it's probably, you know, I think it's pretty much proven too that the FBI colluded against Malcolm X and against Martin Luther King and probably JFK. I haven't looked into that, but
yeah, I know Martin was under surveillance.
You know what I mean? Like we've seen what they've done. We've seen them being super fearful of what they say as a black messiah coming, you know, an uprising and, you know, trying to take a hold of people and galvanizing them and, you know, challenging authority and the establishment. And it's crazy, you know. They're so fearful of, you know, change, of any kind of change, of any sort of, you know, power swaying or shifting or even just becoming, if it's like, you know, here to, you know, just getting a little more equal. And I think that's all the majority of any prominent black leader that we've learned about in history, they've just wanted to take the totem pole from here to here. It's not like they wanted to swing things. They just wanted civil rights. They just wanted, you know, equality, which says a lot about, you know, the country that we live in, you know.
Yeah, and they did a good job too of that, like what you brought up in terms of showing. And I think this is like part of the cognitive dissonance of the whole thing for me, that like the whole fight for progress idea in general, and the people that are holding it back, is that there genuinely are people that think like would tell you that they want certain things, certain levels of progress, that are simply unwilling to do the things in their own control to get it there. Right. And they morally line up with these things. Like that's why showing the cop even kind of getting this point of like of even leaning, of even being like, like the picture they're painting of, oh my God, they want to take our shit and do what we did to them, which is the ironic part, obviously, in this, like do what we did to them. But it's that if all of this could be solved in my magic world that never will exist, if this side that's trying to paint this ridiculous picture would just shut the fuck up, listen to actually what is wanted, which is just the same shit. And sure, you have people that are willing at this point to fight incredibly hard to uphold, no, fuck that, we don't want. But then you get it revealed. Then you get to go, okay, you either now within this, you don't get to like hide behind the aggressive racism and go, well, my hands are no. There has to be some, all right, this is what is wanted. We can help. This should be something we can do. This should be something that one is like, it's not morally. Fred Hampton was really good at that, walking into a room and putting it into a moral position and framing it to people in a way that you can't even debate out of it. You have your answer before he even asks you a question because of how it's framed. And so like that to me is like the crazy cognitive dissonance. And this is like, it's wild to me that people listen to the extravagant end of the picture that's portrayed. It's
crazy. I think
fear mongering.
The reason why people listen to this is the level of propaganda that was used to, you know, dismiss the Black Panther Party as some extremist, you know, black group that was
again sounded a little Nazi-like to me.
you know, equivalent to the Black KKK was just
Bonkers.
insane. They're out here, you know, feeding kids before they go to school every morning. You know what I mean? They out here making pancakes for kids who can't afford, whose parents can't afford to feed them before they go to school. You know, they're trying to build a community with not only black people but poor white people and Puerto Ricans. They're trying to unite rival black gangs. This is all of the inner workings of the Black Panther Party, but the level of propaganda that was used
And
against them.
even when you saw the Black Panthers go take a meeting with like what was the other group?
It was one of the rival gangs in Chicago. I
Yeah, like
can't
when they
remember the
went
name of
in there and the dude had the propaganda paper that the FBI had
it.
typed
Yeah, oh
up.
yeah.
And
Totally
like
forgot about that.
even see so just to like reiterate that, because that was a crazy something I want framed, because this idea that police and the FBI and that whole entity are there to maintain peace. And gang, you're scared of gangs. That's like part of their thing is gangs. Da, 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 da.
Mm,
Literally, the gangs were getting together and going, "We're good. Everything is fine on our end. It's them." And
mm,
they were trying to stir up more gang activity.
absolutely.
Like, so again, it like the roots are gross. So I guess this kind of ties the whole thing together. It's a good place to bring it together and wrap it up ish. But we brought it up a few times in terms of what the broader context of the movie and shit is. And I think I'm a statistics person. I thought of this the other day, and I think it's kind of a genius way to put this. And again, all ties into the roots of this place and the justice system. All of these things are tied together, but the roots of all of this are one way that we need to see they are. And it's so to bring it back to the kind of historical Nazi comparison thing, only because so when you look at how things were rolled out in terms of, all right, you want to demonize this group of people. Your goal is get rid of these people. So knowing that, you can back analyze and go, okay, let's read the policy. Let's read the statistics of what your rates of death, all that shit were in the countries at the time. And by looking at that, you can probably guess what the policies there were aimed to do, right? So you could look at, okay, you had you had this many people killed because your policy said that you wanted those people killed. You were doing a good and efficient job of what you wanted. So if you took the statistics in almost any economic, when you frame it in terms of death, and when you analyze it in that way, and you look at America, if you looked at it like that, and then I said, what would you say the goal of the way all of this works is? It is what? To kill black people. It's all to lead to higher death rate among black people, whether that's gentrification, whether that's all of these things are to lead to less access to healthcare, are to lead to less access, meaning less. It is all part of the same thing. And Jay has that line in Murder to Excellence with the Fred Hampton line, which also ties into this because Kanye has a line on there that uh, is similarly eerie with this, and it's what's the life expectancy for black guys? The system's working effectively. That's why. Like this is all a part of a revealing of the system is working effectively.
Yeah.
This is what the system is. So
Mm.
these modern debates and these modern that is what the system. I think we're it feels like getting closer to the point where we can rest the book on that being a debate. Like it's almost impossible to watch this played out and go, this is not what this is set up to do. It's not. They didn't take advantage of a loophole to kill Fred Hampton. They organized like a fucking frat and did it. Like I think that is the biggest thing for me when I watch it and kind of tie everything together. Like at the end of the day, all the debates we have of how do we do this and that, when you have to accept, and I think Fred Hampton in a lot of his speeches and a lot of the way he pushed for education and pushed for liberation. His whole idea of liberation was getting out of that system, because that system is the one that is working effectively. And that's why you had separate systems of feeding people and separate systems of, if you won't feed us, we will. And I think that is what I hope a lot of people take away is, okay, that is what the system is. This isn't an anomaly. This isn't, oh, you know, they really thought he was. No, this was, they saw he was a danger to their way of life, which was white supremacy, and did anything in their power, which was what you see play out in the movie, to silence that.